Hey guys, welcome to SheKnowsArsenal. My name is Jessica. I'm your host. You can follow me on Twitter at JustinoTweets and at SheKnowsArsenal. Welcome to another episode. We're going to do a match review. We're going to do a couple things on the show. We're going to review the match, the North London Derby. We're going to debrief on everything that happened with Mudryk and kind of talk about how we feel about that. We didn't really talk about it. I was gone over the weekend, and so I released a pre-recorded video giving you guys my thoughts. And so we can talk about that as well, but also talk about transfers because there's been some links and, so we need to go through that. So make sure you guys like the video, subscribe to the channel. Well. Arsenal. 8 points clear. Slapping Tottenham. Doing it with ease. Shitting in the toilet bowl. Fucking love it. Injected into my veins, guys. Injected. Wow, what a performance. I went on several previews and I made some big claims, okay? Several previews. I know I said it here as well as on the Football Terrace and Never a Foul that we were not only going to leave there with something, but we would probably leave there with all 3 points. And I think me and Dan both predicted a 2-1 victory. And then, I went on to some mixed podcasts, meaning there were Tottenham fans on there, and they seemed very unbothered, right? But giving it the whole, you never win at our place, you always lose at our place, you guys are going to get a red card and crumble like you guys always do. I don't even know why you guys would predict a win. It's just blah, blah, blah. You even saw against Brighton, you guys weren't that good. You saw against Newcastle, you guys aren't that good. And I was like, but do you see how bad you guys are? Okay. And I do think that there is an element of, oh my God, they're crumbling because of what happened against Newcastle. Oh, if a team sits in a low block and they can't get past them, then they're going to be blunt. They're not going to be able to score. Newcastle was totally overblown, I think, by the media. And I love the response from Arsenal fans that were just like, it was just a game where we drew it. We weren't at our best. Newcastle nullified us. We nullified them. It was a 0-0. It was a 0-0 before we even kicked the ball. So going into this match, I do think that there is an element of, well, Arsenal, they don't really go away. They haven't really beat anybody big away. They haven't really, always still like the same stuff. We absolutely rolled them over. We just kind of pushed them aside. Arsenal went into the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium and performed like they were playing Bournemouth away. Like there was no sense of nervousness, of worry, of, shakiness. There was nothing. It was business as usual, as if they're not our rivals, as if it's not a North London derby. We just have to get these 3 points to come up in your toilet bowl and own you. That's what we're going to have to do. And that's what happened. And you could just see it from the first 10 minutes that we were just on them and they couldn't do anything about it. They tried a little bit in the first 10 minutes, of the game. We shut them down. They tried again after we scored the first goal. We snuffed that out. They tried again at the beginning of the second half. And, a lot of people were like, oh, they played so much better in the second half. Well, they couldn't have played any worse than they did in the first half. And quite frankly, game state for me is always so important. And when we start talking about how the game went, the game was already won. And so we just had to kind of make sure that they didn't score a goal. And that's exactly what we did. Now, there were some really standout performances from yesterday. There wasn't any bad performances, but I do think that there were some that stood out more than others. But Arsenal now sit 8 points clear at the top of the table. And these are 3 points that I don't think people expected us to get. And I said going into this match that I felt like we needed to get 4 points from the next 2 games. I didn't care how it happened, whether we, drew to Spurs and beat United or vice versa. But now you go into the Manchester United game, already have taken 3 points from a fixture that you don't usually get points from. So now you can go into the United game with so much confidence at your place and business as usual again. I do think that this is such an important game because of their resurgence and our resurgence. And kind of the narrative around United being like they're back, and I do sense that there's like a almost like force trying to make them into the title challengers and have them overshadow us in some way. And I do think that Arsenal beating Spurs is going to be the confidence, not really the confidence, but kind of like the marker that like you can go away to Spurs, get the 3 points, and then go home and then perform in front of your people. And so I think it's super important. Let's see what you guys are saying. All right. Phil says, yeah, Justino put the frauds in their place. Matt G says, they didn't know what to do with us. If they tried to push up, we played through their press. If they sat back, we passed around for an opening. They couldn't get near us. Like, I mean, it got to a point where it was like, I know it was embarrassing because the flicks, the tricks, the one passage of play where I think it was Saka to Martinelli, and Martinelli puts a cross that's like very flamboyantly crosses the ball into Eddie Nketiah. Eddie diving header. I think Lloris saves it. It's parried out or headed out by a Spurs player, and then Thomas Partey absolutely like annihilates the ball, hits it cleaner than I've ever seen a player hit a ball, and it hits the upright. And at that point I was like, this has got to be so embarrassing for them because we are just toying with them at this point, and I loved every minute of it. It was so juicy. I loved it. Dallas Sue says, did you get an apology from George? No, I didn't, but just seeing like the sadness on his face was good enough for me because he was really talking it up as though it was going to be business as usual for them, not taking into account how good we've been. Somebody that I don't really know, I forget who said it, but I saw it on Twitter today, was saying that Arsenal have yet to get swept up in any sort of like pressure of a match, or we've really like just swept aside a lot of teams. And some of the teams that we've swept aside are teams that people really struggle with. Brighton away from home, Brentford away from home. Those two really stand out to me as games where people go there and get whacked, absolutely whacked. And we just handled those games so well. I mean, the Brighton towards the end, it got a little bit, but it was like we were always 3 goals up and then they came back. You know what I mean? And so we've just kind of swept teams past. Like we just kind of just shoot, just do it, just do it. I mean, Spurs away felt easy. And I think that was a really interesting point because I'm like, if we can keep this up, man, I mean, it's something that I would have never thought. Going away from home last season to Leicester was we got 2-0 up and then you had to like batten down the hatches and defend for your life. This season, it's control the game, pass it around. If they try to up the tempo, we slow them down. When we up the tempo, they can't slow us down. We can deal with, we can counterattack you. We can tiki-taka you. We can cross you to death. We can do all the things. And what a preseason can do for you. I mean, it's not even like a year's difference. It's the difference between what Arsenal were at the end of last season to who they were, in preseason. I mean, what is this? Let's see. Reload says never wasn't winning against them washed dead team. I've seen many an Arsenal team go to Tottenham and not win. Keenan says we need to smash United 3-0. I think if we do, the title is ours. I think it's going to be I think it's going to be a really difficult game. They're the most informed team in the league besides us. I think they won 9 games in a row, and they just beat Manchester City. I'm sure they'll beat Crystal Palace in midweek. And so getting to Sunday, I do think that they'll have confidence. I don't think that if they are too arrogant and they think they're just going to roll us over at our place without the help of the referees, they have another thing coming. We're unbeaten at home. So, but I do think that it's going to be a battle. I think they'll be up for it. We'll be up for it. And I don't know, like for me as an Arsenal fan, my introduction into Arsenal was in the midst of the battle between Arsenal and Manchester United in the early 2000s. And so I feel it coming back, and I am so excited by it, but I'm also like, "Oh my god, what if it happens again?" You know what I mean? Because if you guys ever went into a match like back then, Arsenal versus Manchester United, you know what I'm talking about. It was nothing like these North London derbies. It was two really, really good teams going at each other. And often, some of the games, you didn't even get to see good football. You just saw a bunch of men out there just fighting. It was like insanity. And you had two brilliant managers going up against each other as well. And so, could this be, you know, the second coming of Sir Alex Ferguson versus Wenger? Can it be Arteta versus Ten Hag? Because Ten Hag is doing his thing. Like, let's be real. Like, as much as I don't like to say it, Ten Hag is doing his thing. And so I'm like, damn, this is nuts. The one thing I will say though is I think Casemiro and Fred are both on 4 yellows, and I'm not gonna lie, I am hoping that one of them gets a yellow against Crystal Palace midweek. You know what I mean? But going back to the game, the first half was just an absolute clinic. If you want to call it a testimonial, you can call it a testimonial. So many performances really stood out to me. I would say Eddie Nketiah. What I'll say about Eddie is that what frustrates me about the conversations around Eddie is that I do think that there's a section of the fan base that feel almost like they don't want to acknowledge the growth and improvement from Eddie because they conflate it with well, if Eddie's good, then that means that we don't need anybody else. And I think you can appreciate what Eddie has done and still also hold the opinion that more improvement needs to come from Eddie and in terms of recruitment as well, bringing other players in. You can say Eddie has really improved and impressed you with, and also still hold the opinion that he may not be, the answer. And it really, no Arsenal fan can actually sit here and truly say that, like, they do not see an improvement in Eddie Nketiah. You can't. If you're saying that, you're lying. And if you don't think he's been really, really good in this period, you're also lying. But you can feel that way, that he's improved and he's done a really good job in Jesus's absence, and also feel like we still need to improve. And that's why the Eddie conversations are so difficult. You know what I mean? And maybe it's because he has the number 14 and people are still holding that against him. Maybe it's because he's on 100,000 pounds per week and people are holding that against him. Or, we should have brought in a different player and blah, blah, blah. But I still hold the opinion that if his name was Edinho, or some shit like that, and he was playing in the Bundesliga or a different league, people will be begging this player to come to Arsenal. Because if you just took all away the preconceived notions and the contract and him coming through our academy and not being as good as Saka, but, whatever, you could appreciate him for what he is. And he's a player that has an elite mentality, that's doing a really good job in the absence of a really important player for us. And you should give him his fucking flowers. Now, in yesterday's performance, I thought he did a really good job getting in and amongst the center backs, winning free kicks, linking play. And the only thing that was missing was a goal. And that's the thing with Eddie, is that the next step for him is he can score goals against everybody. But when he gets in the big matches away from home, the pressurized matches, or just like Newcastle at home, Spurs away, those are the games where I'm like, okay, when you get the opportunity, you have to take it. And so he's already like, I know you guys maybe play like video games or whatever, you like unlock certain parts of like the game. He's unlocked the link play. He's unlocked, the confidence. He's unlocked the physicality. The next thing that and clinical finishing against the lower half, he needs to unlock finishing against the best of the best. Once he does that, then I think a lot of people will start to really change their minds around Eddie. But in terms of his progression from last season to this season, I mean, you cannot sit there and act like he wasn't really, really good yesterday. And I mean, even the little skill at the end of the game, on the touchline, just like the little bring it down and dribble them and then do the 1-2 with Saka and then the little rainbow over whoever that was, and then they fouled him. I mean, that is confidence in a really pressurized match for a player that's was heavily criticized by this fan base. And so I think you give flowers where flowers are due. I think Eddie's performance for me really stood out. The only thing that is kind of holding it back a little bit is the finishing. He had a really good opportunity when I think it was like Martinelli and Saka pressurized Lloris, and they made some mistakes at the back. It fell to him. It was a good save by Lloris, but I'm thinking you have to bury that. There was the phenomenal pass from Granit Xhaka on the break in the second half, and it was such a good pass. And then Eddie's his touch was a little bit off to the right, and he just couldn't get the right connection. And so that is the next step for Eddie, is becoming clinical. We know he's clinical against the lower half, but it's in these games that will separate him from being a good backup to somebody who we can really, really count on. But I thought his performance was absolutely insane. Especially because my expectations of him were not that high to begin with, if that makes sense. Let's see. Sohan says, I reckon Eddie bagged for us this weekend versus United. I would love that. Saida says, I can admit that Eddie has improved a lot. I noticed this year, I noticed this last year in preseason. I'm glad we've still able to maintain a high level of performances with him in the side. Exactly. That's all you can all like hope for a player. And it's just, you could recognize the improvement without it meaning anything bigger than you just think he had a really, really good game and he's improved. Amira says, is Eddie the answer now? No. Can he be one day? Maybe. Is he doing what he's supposed to do right now for his age, experience, and situation he's in? I say abso-fucking-lutely. Mentality will take him so far. I always think about the scene in All or Nothing where he was sitting there in the cafeteria or canteen, whatever you want to call it. And he was basically like telling Sambi to like, buck up, buddy. Everybody wants to play, just shut up and get on with it. And when he asked for playing time in multiple games in a row and he got it, he answered the call. And that's so important. Let's see. Kondawani says, Eddie's got it. He's something we need at the moment. He's not the win you the league level, but he's putting in the work and it's helping. You're 100% right. Let's see. The Ed Reese says, I think I also feel bigger energy from Eddie. I agree. I think you could just tell, like, he's standing up tall, and he has a little bit about him, and he's not shirking away from the big games and stuff like that. He just has to get that finishing in the big games, but so far so good with him. Now, another performance that really stood out for me was bukayo Saka. But I mean, how much more can we really say about Saka? He had Sessegnon on toast. Him and Ben White are just like the perfect combination. One thing that I was wrong about, I think early on in the season, was the importance of Ben White overlapping. Because he plays the inverted role and he plays tucked in, and we really didn't see a lot of that from him last season. I didn't really recognize how important that would be for Bukayo, because once Odegaard moved a little bit more into midfield and was more of a true 8 and wasn't like his partner in crime like he was last season, it was important to get another player near Saka so that he could find his area, find his space, and also so he can combine, because Saka is a really good combination player. He's not necessarily the type of winger he's not a one-on-one demon. And I think that that's something that Arsenal needs to look for in the transfer market. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But Saka is really good in terms of knowing when to go inside, knowing when to go outside, knowing when to have that little burst past his marker, and when to use his fullback and when not to use his fullback. And I thought him and Ben White did a really good job at that, working together. But Saka was just so good. And it's hard to say it because we know that he's really good. But I mean, he had them on toast. They couldn't live with him. And the first goal was obviously a Lloris howler. But those types of howlers come when you start to put teams under pressure and they start to realize that they're dealing with somebody that's on a different level to them. Spurs in both games, Lloris had howlers when we started to turn up the heat on them. And so, yes, it was a Lloris mistake, whatever. But I think it was because we started to put pressure on them and they were like, what's going on here? And Saka, when he got to the byline and just hit it as hard as he could at Lloris just let it in. And, Saka did a lot of that in that game. Beating the man, knowing when to use the fullback. Him and Ben White did a really good job, and so his performance definitely stood out to me. Let's see. Let's see what you guys are saying. Daniel says they are terrified of him. Dev M says Saka was cooking the right side yesterday. Let's see what you guys are saying. Asunifolua says Nketiah is like Jota. His contribution this season will be key. We kind of talked about that as well. What I was saying about Nketiah is he does not have to be as good as Alvarez or as good as Jota, but he needs to have that same type of impact, maintain the level until the starter gets back. And that's exactly what he's exactly what he's done. Roman says, just see how quickly you passed on the point of Saka is not good at, but Eddie not. Let me see. Just see how quickly you passed on the point Saka is not good at, but Eddie not. I don't know what that means. Rewrite that in a different way, and I'll read it again because I don't really know what that means. Maximia says, have you seen Eddie has built up on his strength? He is no more of a pushover, can hold up and stand on his own. I agree. Tom says Saka is in a league of his own. I agree. So yeah, I think Saka, it's just hard to Saka is just Saka. Do you know what I mean? But a really good performance from him. The next player that I did want to talk about is obviously the second goal scorer, and that's Martin Odegaard. He has the most goal contributions from a midfielder this season. I think he has 8. He has 8 goals this season, and he has the same amount of goal contributions as KDB this season, and that just speaks to the level that he's been on. I do think that on form, he's the best midfielder in the league. In terms of his contributions on and off the ball. And the thing I love about Odegaard is he does have the poetry and motion aspect of his game, but he also has the, I can play positional football and do the things that I'm supposed to do, the patterns of play and all that kind of stuff. And I do the stuff off the ball. It's very difficult to find a player that looks beautiful on the ball, does the tricky stuff, he's nice to watch, but is also effective and also is willing to do stuff off the ball. He leads the team by example. That was definitely something that I think a lot of us had questions about at the beginning of the season was, is Odegaard going to have enough oomph? Is he really captain material? Is he going to have enough of a voice in the locker room? Is he too quiet? Does he have any goals in him? All this. So many questions around Martin Odegaard, especially because I think that was still an element of some Arsenal fans being like, well, we should have got Madison. Or should have got so-and-so. He's answered all the questions, you guys. I mean, Odegaard, this is the player that Real Madrid probably wanted, or thought that he would become. And he's playing for us. Not saying like we're not great, but we know Real Madrid and what they represent in terms of football. And we're so blessed to have him. I mean, he has just been an absolutely insane player, especially when the World Cup ended and all the questions around what Arsenal was going to be like without Gabriel Jesus. He definitely has stepped up into that role and scored the goals and is leading the team. The shot, I mean, first of all, let's just say that Odegaard had several shots in that first half. And then the third one, I think, went in, and that was the second goal. And you guys, when that goal went in, I thought I was going to pass out. Like, I just couldn't believe it because I was just like, surely they're going to get that penalty. Surely after the first goal, they're going to come back in. Surely this, surely that. And I was like, if we could just get a second, if we could just get a second, if we could just get a second. The second goal went in and I was like, game over. They're not coming back from this. And man, Odegaard, our number 8, our captain, I love that kid so much. And people are starting to really recognize him because I do think that in general, there's like this feeling that Arsenal are not a great bunch of individual players. They're a group of players that play well together in Arteta's system. And it's, they're playing above their level. I do think that Arteta's coaching and our system and the way that we play and the hours put in on the training ground does take this group of players to another level. But I also think a group of players cannot play this type of football if they're not already a different gravy. You know what I mean? And I also think that you have to be a great individual player to play this way, at such a high level. And so I think it's disingenuous to say that Arsenal don't have any extraordinary individuals. Are they considered world class? Yeah, blah, blah. That'll come when they win trophies. But Odegaard is different gravy. He's a different level of player. The IQ, the roundness to his game, this stepping up when his team really needs him. And at 24 years old as well, kid is absolutely mustard. Odegaard for me is, I have a couple players in my head that I do believe will be world class. If they're not world class yet, whatever, because they haven't won enough trophies, whatever, that's fine. I don't give a shit. But there's a couple players in my mind that I'm like, they're going to be world class. At some point, people are going to start recognizing them as world class players. He's definitely one of them. Maybe I'll reveal that list to you guys one day. There's 260 of you guys in here. Make sure you like the video and subscribe to the channel. Just never forget, people wanted Buendia over Odegaard. I was definitely not one of them. You know what I mean? But yeah, I mean, we'll talk about that a little bit more later. Arsenal's second options or players that, we miss out on a player and then the player that comes in ends up being a better option or just as good of an option or whatever. We'll talk about that later when we get to transfers. A lot of you guys are, well, who are we going to get? Who are we going to buy? What about transfers? We'll talk about that in a little bit, you guys. Literally, we have got to spend some time on the Northland Derby. It's a significant fixture for Arsenal and our title hopes. And transfers are super important, but also let's just recognize when what a great performance that was yesterday. Yomi says, Jess, reflecting on the Mudryk saga, we probably dodged a bullet. Okay, we'll get to that. I'll star that. Let's see. Dev M says, Jess, we still have the youngest squad in the league, and look what we're doing. The peak of this team is frightening. I agree, as long as you can keep them together. Amira says, also massive credit to Arteta for selling him the project when we were in the literal trenches and getting him permanently when we finished 8th. Best salesman I know. You ain't never lied. So once Odegaard's the second goal went in for Odegaard, I knew the game was over. I just knew the game was over. They weren't coming back from that. And the reason why I really knew the game was over is because their attacking players weren't getting that much joy. And if they did squeeze by, we had one player that was playing out of his freaking skin. Ramsdale. 7 saves. 7 saves. 7 saves. All of their shots on goal were saved by Ramsdale. Hello. That is the type of performance that if you, at the end of the season, if you end up winning the league, you go back to that performance and remember that was a pivotal performance from an individual. There have been times in the past, especially a goalkeeper like Alisson, where I did feel like if he had not done that, they would not be where they are. You know what I mean? There's some players that just, they step up and they have a performance and you just remember it in the end. That could be it. Ramsdale, 7 saves, and they were really, really good saves, especially the Sessegnon one, and I think Kane's first header. No, it was Son. When Son got in, the header was a little bit easier, but it was the one where Son got in behind our defense. I think Sessegnon was offside, and then he let the ball go, or one of their players was offside, and they let it go, and Son run through. That was a big save because that was in the first half. Had that went in, the trajectory of the game would have changed. So he did that. That was in the first half. And then the Sessegnon chance, kind of maybe, I think it was around the 60th, 70th minute. And the kick save. I mean, we were talking about just at the beginning, Ramsdale, a lot of the conversation around Ramsdale last season was that his distribution was great, but we weren't sure about his shot stopping. He has it all. He has shot stopping and he has the distribution. He just has to find a way to package it all together and minimize the mistakes. If he can do that, Ramsdale could be whatever he wants to friggin' be. He's such a talented player and he's so young for his position. Goalkeepers are not in their prime anywhere near it at 24 years old. And I do think that a little bit rough on him, a little bit oh my God, he made this mistake, We always remember keeper mistakes. I get that. But let your praise be as loud as your criticism of Ramsdale, because they should have scored a goal. And depending on when they score that goal, we don't know what's going to happen at that point. And so, I mean, it's from the mentality, the shit house, all of that kind of stuff. And then being able to come up with a performance like that, away from home, North London Derby, a place that you haven't won at since 2014. They were going for their fourth win in a row, whatever, at home against us. Like, he was insane in that game. And I mean, everybody's going to remember, the moment where he almost got kicked in the head. I have the screenshot here where an absolute idiot came down onto the pitch or onto the little, wall right there at the pitch and tried to kick Ramsdale after the game. And that I think it did take away from his performance. And then, obviously the media was trying to act like, well, he shouldn't have been celebrating towards their fans. And, basically like he asked for it, but nobody asked to be kicked in the head or a fan to come out and try to attack a player. Like, hello, is that what we're really out here saying? It's like they're so desperate to blame Arsenal for things that they will not just put the responsibility and the blame on the party that deserves it. And Ramsdale did not do anything wrong. It's a North London derby where you do jeer the opposition's fans, you do celebrate on their pitch, you do dances in the corners when you score goals. I mean, they would do the exact same if they had been able to do that at the Emirates. Like, hello, it is a North London derby. So Ramsdale didn't do anything wrong celebrating in front of their fans, but for that idiot to come down with his bowl cut off, like out of the seats and onto that wall and try to kick Ramsdale, they have got to ban him for life, from the Tottenham stadium. The funniest tweets were the ones that were like, don't ban him because it's enough of a punishment alone to have to watch that team play week in and week out. But he must be banned 110%. There's no room for that, in football. And no matter what Arsenal did on the pitch in terms of celebrating or whatever, no fan should be like coming out there trying to attack a player. It's lame. And it depending on, like, the thing is about it as well is like, people are like, well, he didn't kick him hard or whatever. But I'm like, if Ramsdale's in a different position or somebody doesn't get him quick enough, he could kick him in the head. You know what I mean? And you never know what will happen. So I don't think it's about how hard or what Ramsdale did. They were wrong, period. Like, there's just no way that you can milk this or turn it or switch it onto Arsenal. It's their fault. They were bitter because they lost. And if that were an Arsenal fan, nobody would say that a Tottenham player deserved that. We know that, right? So it was a joke. Don once said he tried to kick the wrong keeper. He should have kicked Lloris instead. I agree. Ricardo says, thinking about young players, what is the kid at? Okay, Javi Simone. Let's see. Don one says, Richard Keys is a disgrace. That guy should be banned from football, trying to blame on Ramsdale. Daniel says, that little toe rag, hope he gets banned for life, scumbag. Dev M says, I wouldn't expect better from people who chose to support a team like Spuds. I mean, and that's the thing. It's like the English media does have like this weird relationship with teams celebrating and, there being any sort of like fun in the game. Because I'm sure that they were bitching and moaning and complaining because, Martinelli trapped the ball on his back, that Nketiah was sombreroing it over people, that Martinelli threw the red and white scarf over the overhead cam and all that kind of stuff. That, Martinelli should house Richarlison in the corner. I'm sure that they didn't like that because the English media does have like this, you should just win the game and clap and then go off the pitch. Football is about rivalry. It's about, it's about that energy. It's a North London derby. No other derby in terms of Premier League has the same level of energy to it. Not the Merseyside derby, not the Manchester derby. The North London derby is something completely different. There's always going to be an element of a fire bubbling underneath the surface. There's always going to be a little bit of something extra. And you saw so much of it throughout the game. But where the line has to be drawn, no matter if you like that, Ramsdale was celebrating or not on the pitch, which is his right, is a fan coming out of the stands and trying to hurt a player. Like, do you know what I mean? And so Like, I remember I saw it when Richarlison did, like, a little move or keepy ups or something, like, on the pitch, and they went wild about it. "Oh my god, he's doing that, blah, 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 blah." Like, hello? Like, this is a game, It is 22 grown-ass men kicking a ball on grass. There's gonna be a little bit of fun to it, loosen up. I think that's my thing is loosen up. Like, we know what the line is, and the line is not Ramsdale celebrating towards the Tottenham fans. Like, we know that, right? Um, Denny says even Tottenham players are also frustrated with Ramsdale's performance. Jess, if that was an Arsenal fan that did that, let's be honest, the FA would give us a stadium ban. Shaking my head. Exactly. And I do think that the one thing I will say about this game, though, like beyond this whole bullshit, and they should be the only ones fined, the only one getting reprimanded by the FA. They shouldn't even talk to Arsenal because we didn't do anything. But the one thing that I will say is that I'm very surprised we didn't get a home cooking. I'm very surprised we didn't get a home cooking. If you're not familiar with that phrase, it basically means like Tottenham didn't get home advantage. It's basically what you saw in the Manchester derby. No offense, but like in any other circumstance, if you're not at Old Trafford, that goal does not stand. All the referees that kind of spoke about it after the fact said it was a subjective call, and they gave it to the benefit of the attacker, blah, 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 blah. And so essentially, like, basically, it's because they were at Old Trafford and they gave the benefit to them. That happens in big grounds with good teams. Sometimes you get a home cooking. No calls, the big calls all go against you, and you're just like, damn. We felt it at Old Trafford where everything kind of went against us. Later on, they say that call back for, Martinelli's goal shouldn't have happened. We know what it feels like. We know what it looks like. And I'm very surprised we didn't get a home cooking at Spurs. But I also think that those types of calls and stuff are kind of reserved for the better teams. And we've even seen that calls have been more favorable to us at our place. I think when you get better, calls naturally just go your way, especially at big grounds. So I'm surprised we didn't get that, because in years gone past, the Højbjerg play acting in the box, trying to get a penalty off of a nothing challenge from Saliba, that is given as a penalty. That is something that definitely happens last season. No contact, but just him jumping up in the air, play acting, yellow card for Saliba, penalty, boom. And so the one thing I'll say about the referee is I think he did a pretty decent job, not taking the game away from the 22 players on the pitch and making it about himself. But also Spurs, they have to take, responsibility for themselves. They just couldn't get near us, and they had gotten into okay, we're just going to try to get a penalty in like the 30th minute. And sorry, and that's just lame. So I thought the referee did a good job. Excuse me. So yeah, I thought the referee did a good job in that way. Dallas, who says, Jess, Eddie should have been substituted because of the shift he put in. Our lack of depth meant he had to stay on. We'll talk about lack of depth and all that kind of stuff in a little bit. Khalid said Spurs celebrated like they won the league, and they go last minute draw against Chelsea. Didn't see the media going after that club for celebrating. Imagine what they'll say when we win the league. They shouldn't be celebrating it because they haven't won it in 18 years. They should just, and Liverpool and Chelsea weren't good enough. So it really is like a false league, all that bullshit. I don't give a damn. If we win it, I don't care. Like, that would just be insane for us. There's 328 of you guys in here, which is absolutely insane. Make sure you guys like the video, subscribe to the channel. The next player that we have to talk about is none other than Big Gabby. What have I been telling you? What have I been telling y'all? Hello? You guys know. I freaking love Gabriel. And I think the reason why I love him is because I do think that, he doesn't get enough credit. So I try to elevate his performances. Not that I try to make him seem like they're better than what they are, but I try to make sure that like they're recognized in some capacity. And since the World Cup, and maybe even a little bit before that, he's been our best defender. And that's no shade to Saliba. Saliba's just struggled a little bit to get back on pace after being at the World Cup and maybe just shaking off a little bit of disappointment of not really getting as much playing time as he felt like he should have for France. I don't know what it is. I'm reading between the lines there. But no shade to Saliba, but Gabriel has been an absolute monster. Gabriel and Saliba are the perfect dynamic for a center back pairing. And I do think that we talk a little bit about them like separately more than we should because it's about what they can do together. And I don't think I thought Saliba had a good game as well. But it's the big headers, it's the getting into, Kane, it's the physicality, the aggression, the last ditch tackles, the blocks. It's those types of things that get you the points away from home at difficult fixtures. And Gabriel has been the centerpiece of that basically since last season. Somebody that lives and breathes defending. Yes, he's good on the ball. Yes, he can pass. Yes, he's, can do all that kind of stuff. But his main focus is making sure he keeps the ball out of the back of the net. And he had another monster performance yesterday. He's our best defender away from home. You know what I mean? And I just think, yes, he has the odd moment here or there, but Gabriel is 24, 25 years old. He'll shake those off eventually. But he's just our wall back there. I mean, his energy, I just absolutely love him. And beyond, Ramsdale and Odegaard and Saka, who I thought really stood out, Gabriel is somebody that I think people really need to start giving their flowers to. Not saying he's the best center back in the world or anything like that, but just because Saliba is what he is, young player of the year in France and, the next sensation and stuff does not mean that Gabriel is not fucking amazing as well. 25 million, 23 million or whatever it was from Lille 3 years ago. That was a steal. That was a steal. It was. And the kid is great. And he had to play with the bad teams too. Like Saliba got to come in and play next to Gabriel and play in a nice, calm environment. Gabriel had to play with, David Luiz and, Socrates and these guys, so I love Gabby. I think we forget about him. Ibby says, and thank you so much for your super chat, by the way. Gabriel has been phenomenal ever since he signed that new deal in late October. I agree. This defensive partnership we got is potential to be special. I mean, one of the best defenses, probably like the first or second best defense in the league. Mind you, like I do think that they do say that Newcastle are the best defense, but I also think that like, are they the best on paper? Yes, in terms of the goals that they conceded, but we literally sit on the halfway line and it's just different. It's a different type of defending. Like, you know what I mean? It's not sitting, in a mid to low block sometimes. Like, it's just different. It's a different vibe. And so Newcastle have done really well, but I still think that when you look at the kind of high wire, high risk, high reward, kind of way that we play, they've done phenomenally for such young players. So I agree. I agree 110% that like Gabriel has been absolutely insane since then. Abscess says, I think Gabriel really stepped up. Also helped Saliba not get that yellow. Saliba did things quietly and Gabriel stood up. Exactly. It's the combination of the two of them is absolutely perfect. Denny says, I think Gabriel really gutted. He's not got called up for the World Cup and he's trying to prove to everybody. I mean, if you watched Bremer play the other day for Juventus, it really escapes me like why Gabriel was not at the World Cup. That player would not have gotten a lot of playing time. That's the truth is, it was always going to be Marquinhos and Thiago Silva. And then the other guy, I forget his name, it's escaping me now. He would have got the other minutes, but to choose Bremer over Gabriel, and Gabriel's been getting the consistent call-ups. I did find that to be a little bit strange, but this is exactly like the type of mentality that you have when you get overlooked for something. You don't capitulate, you don't bitch, you don't moan, you let your performances speak for you, and he's definitely done that 110%. Daniel says, I love Gabriel. He was immense yesterday. They couldn't get through the brick wall of our defense. Don One says, Gabriel's been better than Saliba this season, but people don't want to admit it. Yeah, and it's like, it's not a big deal either. Like, that's the thing. Like, Saliba is new to the league and needs to adapt and needs to get used to playing these types of games. It doesn't surprise me that Gabriel has been a little bit more consistent. Let's see. Troy says Arsenal are ahead, but we really do need a few more play. Okay, you guys really want to talk about transfers? Just we will get there. I promise. I promise. Lord says I'm glad Gabriel didn't go. More training under Arteta. Ruben says he has a mistake in him. We need to upgrade on him for Champions League. He would be great backup for us. I don't agree with this because I also think that we have this idea that all the best defenders, they never have a mistake. They never make a mistake. They do. And so to say like we should move on from Gabriel just because, or he could be a backup now or he can't start for us and we need to upgrade upon him because he has a mistake in him. Well, everybody has a mistake. And Arsenal mistakes get amplified more than anybody else's. 110%. Gabriel has made some mistakes, but whose defender has not? I would say it's only maybe the elite spectrum, top, 10 in the world that you rarely see them make a mistake. But I just think Gabriel needs to keep trucking along the way that he does. I think another left-sided center back to provide competition for him would be useful. But the idea that we need to upgrade upon him because he has a mistake in him. So do we need to upgrade on Saliba because he has a mistake in him as well? Do we need to upgrade on Zinchenko? He has a mistake in him as well. The only player that I think of the Arsenal that very limited mistakes at back there is Ben White. That's it. But if you're saying that a player that has a mistake in them needs to be upgraded upon, then we need to talk about like 4 or 5 of the players that we have back there. I don't agree. Sorry. Anike says Gabriel has improved so much and he seems to have gotten those moments out and he's been more reliable than Saliba, especially post-World Cup. Exactly. Let's see. Kanwari says, wait a sec, was the Thomas handball in the first half deliberate? I don't know. It's hard to decide whether or not somebody deliberately or didn't deliberately handball it, but the referee didn't call it, and he didn't have another foul later on in the game that could have been considered, another yellow or anything like that. I think it's an inconsequential moment that was probably fine. You know what I mean? That did not make a difference in the game for me in any way, shape, or form. For me personally. Mackie says, Gabriel is so vital to us. Bring Caldwell in as backup. Need to give him more rest next season. Yeah, I mean, I like competition for places. I don't feel like Gabriel needs to be moved on or upgraded upon or anything like that. I think his progression over the last 3 or 4 months should be enough for you to be like, okay, maybe if I waited another year, let's see what he can become versus like, just get rid of him. He made a mistake. It's just weird to me. Sohan says, Jess, do you think Big Gabby is captain material? Looks like it to me. I don't know. Because I'm not in the dressing room. Do you know what I mean? I think you only really know who's captain material by what's going on in the locker room. And so I think the captains group that we have right now of xhaka, Odegaard, and Gabriel and Jesus is like the perfect composition right now. But I think Gabriel leads in his own way. That doesn't require a captain's armband or anything like that. Maybe in the future he does become a captain. But right now I think he's leading by example, even at a pretty young age. Like for a center back for me, 20, 24, 25 is not old. 350 of you guys are in here. Make sure you like the video and subscribe to the channel. Richard, I agree. Every player makes mistakes. You just want them to become fewer and far between. And I think Gabriel, like he made a couple mistakes like really quickly in like a succession at the beginning of the season. And then he became bozo all of a sudden. And now that he's went a significant amount of time, people are still hammering him for mistakes that he made months ago. And I don't really understand that. And we don't do that to all of our players. We do that to specific players. And I find that very, very strange. I don't know why. Also, the other thing is that we can look forward to is that Saka and Saliba did not get second or their 5th yellow, so they'll be available for Manchester United. So that's definitely something else that happened in that game. 2 other things that I wanted to note just before we get out of here is so many funny things have come out of this, but I will say that 2 things that will live rent-free in my head forever is Ben White yelling at Sessegnon when he was about to shoot that ball. You guys, like, if you haven't seen the video, just look it up. Just go on to Out of Context Ben White on Twitter, and you will see it. Ben White yells at Sessegnon when he shoots the ball, And obviously, like, Ramsdale makes the save and stuff, but it's just so funny. And then the second thing is obviously Arteta running after Xhaka. I mean, after the game, it was hilarious. I mean, he was walking with Ramsdale and laughing, and he saw Xhaka and turned around. It was so funny. And the days after games, you know, when we win, the big games especially, I mean, it's so fun to be on social media. You know what I mean? And I really, really enjoyed that. Ruben says Saliba was rusty, so it's understandable. Gabriel was making schoolboy errors at the highest level is going to cost us. But again, Gabriel at the beginning of the season was 24, and that's not old for a center back. Again, if you look at our rivals, there's no other team, you know, like in the top four that has this young of a center back pairing. So not taking their youth into, you know, into context at all, I do feel like is disingenuous to the argument about Gabriel in general. You have like Koulibaly back there, Thiago Silva, like these guys for Chelsea. You have Varane, Luke Shaw slash, you know, Lissandro Martinez back there for Manchester United. Man City have Akanji and Stones, who I think is like 28. Ruben Diaz might be a little bit younger, but he hasn't played in a while. Laporte, I think he's like 27, 28. And so to not take Gabriel's age into consideration of why he was making those mistakes, I do think is a little bit like, come on. And he hasn't made them in a while. So why are you holding him accountable for mistakes that he made 3 months ago when now that is 3 months beyond that, he hasn't made those mistakes? Could it be that he just got rid of those mistakes? Or is it you're just holding it against him because you just want a shiny new toy? You know, I don't understand why we would hold mistakes against somebody if they seem to be cutting them out. That's not to say that he won't make another one, but a schoolboy mistake, like, okay, he lost the ball, you know, and Mitrovic scored, but he had the mentality to turn around and score a goal for us and win the game for us. Does that not come into consideration? He had the bad moment against Leeds. It didn't count against him. What else? Like, what else has he done this season that was like horrendous? I don't know, but it was so long ago. Look how long ago Leeds was. And you're still holding it against him. And he's been flawless since October. It's January now. Move on. Like, move on. Leave, like, when players make mistakes, you gotta let it go. If, you know, if after that, you know, he's 25, 26, 27, and he's making horrendous mistakes on a weekly basis and all this kind of stuff, I could hear it, but that's not really what he is. Do you know what I mean? Let's see. Kudwani says most defenders hit their prime after 25. We forgot how Lauren Koscielny was in his early days. Hello. And that's the thing as well. It's like sometimes you have to make the mistakes to get the experience. And I think Gabriel every single season has gotten a little bit better, a little bit more assured. Remember when he couldn't barely pass a ball? You know? So I just think, like, I get it, and everybody's entitled to their opinions. I'm sure we all have a group of players in our head that we feel like maybe is good enough or not good enough, whatever. But I will always stand by Gabriel because I do think that because he's standing next to Saliba, there is this element of Saliba's untouchable and he's golden, and Gabriel is just the bozo clown next to him, too aggressive. But Saliba doesn't get to do the things that he wants to do on the ball and to be calm and cool and be the sweeper if Gabriel isn't doing what he's doing. And I've seen enough last-ditch tackles and stuff like that from Gabriel to say that I really do back him. I think he's a really good player. He may not be the best in the world, but you guys know what I'm saying. So yeah, there's 360 of you guys in here. Make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel. I think those were just like the standout performances again. Everybody played well. Everybody did their part. Tierney coming in on the wing, Tomiyasu coming in and playing who knows what position he was playing. Everybody did their role, got the job done, 3 points, and now we're 8 points clear going into you know, a really difficult clash against a team that's also in really good form, you know, so we'll see how that pans out. Now, I know you guys want to talk about transfers, so we'll talk about that. Let's unpack the Mudryk situation. I didn't go live when that news was breaking. I think it was breaking during the Manchester Derby, I think. And so here are my thoughts. I just think that, like, it was really disappointing just because of how public and like drawn out that whole transfer was. Because like we had been talking about it since before the window had opened. He was our number one target, and there was just a lot of talk and a lot of chatter and a lot of back and forth with journalists. What I will say is that I think that there's a common theme with our transfers is that the more that they're talked about in the public, the least likely they are to get done. Not that I think that the journalists are influencing anything, but I think when Arsenal move quickly and more quietly, the deals tend to get done. But the more of a circus it becomes, Lisandro Martinez, Rafinha, now Mudryk, the players don't tend to end up with us, Vlahovic. And so, you know, basically, I mean, my thought process on this, and I think most Chelsea fans understand this as well. If the ones that I've spoken to, I think that they all kind of understand what happened is that we bid 90 million euros plus a certain amount of add-ons, maybe 15, and they put in 100 plus 25 million add-ons, and so they actually got to the fee that or no, we didn't actually get to the fee. We did stop at 90 million euros. So it was like the breakdown was a little bit different. But Chelsea did get to the 100 million euro asking price, and they went up on they offered more upfront, more guaranteed, and they offered more attainable add-ons. And so that made the deal so much more attractive, to Shakhtar, who were very staunch and very clear about the fact that they wanted 100 million euros, and that was stated many, 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 many times. And I do think that there was an element of the player wants to come to Arsenal so badly that Shakhtar will cave and go with what we offered them because it's more than a fair price. But I don't think Edu and Arsenal took into account that Bowley is a madman, and they colluded behind, Arsenal's back and went over there and closed the deal. And that's what Shakhtar really wanted. They wanted as much money as possible for this player. I know that there's some other parts of this that are about the war and what has happened in their league and all that kind of stuff. So this transfer will be very significant for them in rebuilding, from the war and all that kind of stuff. So I really do understand that. But I think from an Arsenal perspective, losing your number one target in the fashion that we did was very disappointing. My feeling around this is that if you're not willing to meet the asking price if you're not willing to meet the asking price, don't F around. That's my feeling. And we didn't have to waste those 15 days. We didn't have to. We really didn't. And so it was disappointing. It was embarrassing. We were mudded. It was just like, damn, but, waking up the next day and just trying to feel it's like, okay, what do we do from here? And Arsenal still need to bring in a player or two. That's the reality, is that they wasted the time and now they need to go into hyperdrive. But my feeling around it is that we're not quick at negotiating. And usually players that are not as good, that are not really long-term players, they're easier to get. But players that you want for the long term, that you see as a part of your project, that are usually wanted by their clubs, are harder to get out of their clubs. And that's my fear now, is how does Arsenal act quickly and make sure that they bring in one or two players from here that are attractive for the long term and don't just are not just fillers, right? And I'm at the point now where it's like, Mudryk, whatever, I hope Ben White handles you something vicious at the Emirates in April. It doesn't matter, who cares? But what do Arsenal do from here? I've seen tons of tweets of people, saying the player that we bring in after we lose the first player is usually exactly the same or better or all this kind of stuff. And I mean, that's technically true. We didn't get Vlahovic and we ended up with Jesus. We didn't get Buendia, we ended up with Odegaard. We didn't get Lisandro Martinez, we ended up with Zinchenko. It's been fine. My issue with that is just that's fine, but that's all in the summer. We're in January right now with a league on the line, and how do we find somebody that's attractive enough, for the long term as well, that can add something in the short term and the long term, basically, and we're not going to get bent over a barrel because people know we have 95 million pounds to play with. That's the other part of it. Everybody knows we have money. and they also know that we need somebody. If Arsenal go through this January transfer window and don't bring somebody in, they can kiss the title goodbye, because it's only a matter of time before Martinelli and Saka get burnt out / injured, and we don't have anybody of similar quality or similar playing style to step in. You can tell me Emil Smith-Rowe to the cows come in, but we need somebody beyond him because his fitness is not reliable. Okay, and so it is a little bit of a worry. And once we didn't get Mudryk, I did kind of have that feeling like we're not going to bring anybody in. They will say that they couldn't find the right player at the right price, and January is difficult, and we really tried. And, we looked at the other options, but they didn't fit the long-term vision. And, Reece Nelson / Emil Smith-Rowe and Jesus coming back are like new signings and all that kind of stuff. But that would be so, so disappointing in the position that we're in right this moment. I just don't know if I could go into that, Arsenal know what they're doing and we shouldn't, just buy players for the sake of it. I think that there's a gray area between getting your perfect player at the perfect price and buying somebody that doesn't fit your project at all and panic buying. There's something in between there that recruitment, smart buys can do. And that's what Arsenal need to figure out, because they cannot go and not bring anybody in for me. Yomi says, just reflecting on the Mudryk saga, we probably dodged a bullet. Boy isn't worth 70 million, let alone 100 million euros. I didn't really care how much he cost, as long as if that's what Arteta really wanted. Arteta really wanted him. Now, Arteta also really wanted Aouar, and we didn't get him, and he flopped after that. So, it doesn't, I think it's also like he was perfect for us, and Arteta would have been able to work wonders with him. Sometimes a player, you think, okay, you dodged a bullet, but maybe it's just because they didn't come to you. I think Aouar would have been perfectly fine with us. You know what I mean? And so I think I understand what you're saying, but beyond that, what are Arsenal going to do from here? That's the most important thing, but I get what you're saying. Ash, thank you so much for your super chat. Ash says, Arteta will win us the title if he is backed. Backing a manager is not just only in the summer. It's also when something is on the line and he's begging you for players. Hello. HJD says, news has just broke Ben Jacobs that Arsenal target Declan Rice as the main priority for the summer transfer window. Thoughts? I don't care about the summer transfer window right now. That's my first feeling on this, is I don't care. I know we're going to buy well in the summer. We're going to be in Champions League. We're going to be able to attract a different type of player. It's going to be exciting. We're going to get a midfielder. I get that. But I don't want to hear any PR spin right now, because they're trying to soften the blow for not bringing in somebody right now. News like that, coming out like that, feels like PR trying to be like, well, I want to get you excited for the summer and get you looking towards that, because we're not going to get anybody now. So I'm not trying to hear that right now, but it is what it is. Troy says, Arsenal are ahead, but we really do need a few more players to step up and take us through the season. We need fresh blood. I agree. Christopher says, how is Marquinhos coming along? I feel like he needs a loan. I do as well. He is not somebody that's going to help us right now. And the other two players that we're looking at in attacking positions have really, really dodgy fitness records in Reece Nelson and ESR. So 2 players need to come in, period. Okay. And we have the money. And that's the worst thing, is showing Arsenal fans that you have the money is probably the worst thing, because we know it's there. Do you know what I mean? And I'm not just saying just buy anybody. That's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is there has to be a middle ground here. Now, we have been linked with 2-3 wingers as options, because we were unable to get Mudryk. And those 3 players are... y'all, what is this man's name? Because I'm not going to be able to say it. You guys know who I'm talking about. Kulusevski from Napoli, Mitoma, and Trossard. Trossard has also been linked to Tottenham, and Tottenham had a £12 million bid knocked back because Brighton want 25 million, but Trossard is free in the summer. Mitoma, he's only been there for half a second, and we know how Brighton are. Dealing with Brighton is like dealing with old school Leicester. You're going to have to pay a lot, and he just got there, so I don't think he's actually for sale. And then, Krivashella, whatever. I'm not even gonna fuck around with it right now. We're not gonna be in it. Like a player like that playing for Napoli, probably gonna win the league in Champions League. I don't think that that's the type of player that we're gonna be able to attract right off the bat, if that makes sense. And so you kind of have like Trossard staring you in the face, but at the same time, it's like Trossard does not fill me with any sort of like joy, because Trossard at this moment in time is right where his ceiling is going to be. This is as good as Trossard is going to be, and even though he's a good player, he's never going to be great, and he's not really better than Martinelli or Saka. So this is somebody that is already kind of like doesn't want to sit on the bench, this and that kind of stuff. But he's also not any better than what we have, and he can't potentially become better. And so I do think them wanting a permanent transfer for him, because remember, you guys, like he's like a mess. They're going to want a permanent transfer, because they could just not what Brighton could do right now is just not let him dress and let him go for free in the summer. So why would they loan him? I think they'll just let him go for free. And because I think for them, they want to force somebody into buying him now. Otherwise, they'll just say, forget it. Because what kind of loan fee are you going to get for this guy? Is whatever. So for me, it doesn't fill me with any sort of joy. I don't want him, and I think Arsenal need to think of something a little bit more. They need to think of something a little bit more creative. He's being offered to us. He's being offered to us, and quite frankly, I think he's a Spurs type signing. So, yeah, for me, it's not for me. I don't think he's really for us. I think he's somebody that Spurs will eventually get, because they were the first team that was really interested in him. They're trying to offer him to us, probably to get Spurs to offer more. Arsenal need to think of something else. Now, in terms of Mitoma, that's the summer signing, and that's the summer signing that's going to cost you a lot. But, we need somebody now, and that's the problem. Tony says Trossard is just a good body to rotate in, but nothing longer. I think option Z better than anything. Ultima Spell says Jeremy Pino maybe. I mean, has he done anything this season? Let's check. I was more excited about him in the summer. Let's see. 2 goals and no assists. Is that what you guys are into? In 16 matches. So he's been playing games, y'all. Is that what we're into? Is 2 goals and 0 assists? I know that's not everything, and I know he's young, but is that what we're really doing? I'm not sure. I'm not sure. Neto is injured. So yeah, like the thing about it is like there's going to be a much better group of players that are going to be options for Arsenal in the summer. And right now we're in a pinch to try to find somebody that can help us now, but also fit the long-term vision of the club. And that really shrinks the talent pool significantly. Arsenal just don't want to bring in anybody. And so, yeah, I'm at the point now where I'm like, I could very much so see us not bringing anybody in because of that. In terms of, Ferran Torres and Rafinha, both of them are going to want to stay at Barcelona. They're not going to want to leave mid-season. They can wait into the summer and really survey all of their options. Rafinha in particular is playing minutes for Barcelona, so it's not like he needs to be desperate. There's no World Cup this summer. Like there's nothing really that's like would push him to need to leave right now and sit for us, So I think Ferran Torres and Rafinha look a little bit far away. Once those players get there, they are not trying to leave. And so again, there's not really that many options that fit. Like Mudryk was it. He was the jewel. Like he was the, fits the short term, also fits the long term, plays kind of like Martinelli and Saka. Like he kind of was it. Everything beyond that doesn't really fit the scope. So I don't know what Arsenal are really going to do. Sebastian says, how about Thuram or Kolo Muani or Lindstrom? Jesper Lindstrom has been linked to Arsenal, but at the same time, like he just kind of got to Eintracht Frankfurt, and to be honest, I think he'll either wait for a Bayern call or a Dortmund call or something like that. He didn't, when he was being spoken about in the same sentence as Arsenal, he was very much like, I'm happy where I am. I'm a Liverpool fan, so I don't know if he'll come to us or not. I mean, you could put the money down. But yeah. Mbene says, just the only Torres from Barcelona. I mean, I would take Ferran Torres. I just don't think he's going to come to us because once they get to Barcelona, they do not want to leave. Mohammed says Arsenal should sign Anthony Gordon from Everton. I'd rather stab myself in the eye. Martin N says, really, I always see Mudryk as a long-term project who needs 1 or 2 seasons to adapt. I'm not sure if he would have needed 1 or 2 seasons to be the world-class player that he's being deemed to be. I think that his starting point is higher than Marquinhos' starting point. So when I say he can contribute in the short term, I'm not saying be the player that is worth 100 million right off the bat. But what I am saying is that he's a player that could come in and he's probably going to he'd be better than Reiss Nelson and better than Marquinhos. And that's what we need in the short term. So yeah, it's, for me, I don't know, because it's hard to get good players away from their team mid-season. It's going to be the business end of the season. This is why Arsenal don't buy in January. And so we're in a really difficult position, but my faith in us winning the title is very much in the balance and based on like what we do in the January transfer window. Because without Saka and without Martinelli, we are a different side. You can get a couple games out of Vieira as long as xhaka and Partey are there. You can switch out the fullbacks to a certain extent. You have some things you can do there, and Nketiah is doing a good job, but there's just some positions within our squad that are kind of like, if those players are not there, it looks really different. Thomas Partey is one of them, and those wing positions, because we don't have any dynamism in those positions. And the other players are just so injury prone. Dallas, who says, how long until Reiss Nelson gets back? The only thing that I saw was like he put up a story saying like patience or something like that. So I don't know how long it's going to take him to come back. There's no comeback time. Let's see. So Moussa Diaby, we've been linked with him sometimes, but Ed says Nico Williams at Bilbao, maybe. Again, like I'm just hoping that one day I just wake up and the person is signed, because I don't know if I can follow any sagas anymore. The Mudryk saga took the life out of me. Okay, So I think right now I would like to see a player just show up on the doorstep at this point. Abscess says, call back Pepe. What do you think? Everything sounds hard to me. Exactly. And that's why January is notoriously difficult to get deals done unless you're willing to pay over the odds and do it quickly. And Arsenal do not move fast and do not pay over the odds. So that's why we're kind of in a bad position right now, because we missed out on our number 1 target. Denny says, oops. Oh, I didn't mean to block you. Oh no. Denny. No, I have to go back and get him. That was on accident. I will go back and get Denny. I'm so sorry. But Denny was saying that that was an accident. Mudryk really broke his heart. Yeah. He didn't really break my heart in terms of like, I felt like he was the only player that we could ever bring in. It was just more like we lost our number 1 target. I'm not sure that the club has the ability to pivot quickly and get something done. So, but I know like a lot of people were so bought into Mudryk. And the other aspect of the Mudryk thing is that he really wanted to come to Arsenal. Like, no Chelsea fan can really sit there and say that he thinks that he preferred to go to Chelsea. He did not. He asked Shakhtar to accept our bid, and they would not. And they basically said, you either stay here or you go to Chelsea. And I get that we could say, okay, well, why did he stay? He could have waited for this in the summer and all this kind of stuff. But the reality is the kid wanted to leave. They were pressuring. They really wanted the money. They're in a really difficult position here. And so, he was kind of like, in a way, like, not, I don't want to say he was forced, but his hands were tied in a way. And so he really wanted to come to Arsenal. And I think that's the thing, is when you have a player that's so desperate to come to you and then they don't end up with you, it's very like, what? You know? Laska says it's shocking from the Cronkies that they didn't get Mudryk. If they don't show ambition, then we're chase the title. When will they? Here's where I disagree just a little bit on what showing ambition looks like. Mudryk is probably worth no more than 40 million at this point in his career. His career life cycle, he's not worth more than 40 million. He's played less than 30, senior appearances. The Ukrainian league is not a top league. He's just a really top young talent. So there's no way, shape, or form that he was worth 100 million euros. Arsenal getting up to like 70 guaranteed for him, for me, is showing ambition. What I don't like is that we were never willing to go up to what they were like set on, and then so we shouldn't have wasted time and spent that 70 million somewhere else. That's my thing, because they were willing to do the business. And 70 million for a player that was probably worth only 40, with extensive add-ons, and that is showing ambition. So I'm a little bit like, a lack of ambition for me would be not bringing in somebody from here. Not spending the money from here would show me a lack of ambition. Missing out on your number one target is disappointing, but like, damn, Mudryk was never worth that amount of money. I can understand why they stood firm, but I get what you're saying. But like, yeah, that sentence of like, well, why didn't they just spend the 100 million euros on him then? I mean, he's probably only worth like 40. You see what I'm saying? And Ollie says, in today's market, Jazz, Nunez, Anthony, Grealish all went for high fees. When you're a top club, you have to pay the going rate. I mean, we were willing to spend the 70. Again, Nunez had more than one season in the top flight. Anthony had more than one season in the top flight. Grealish had many years in the Premier League, and they went for upwards of 80 million to 100 million. And yes, it's similar in that way, where the market was inflated, but inflated to the point where a player that had less than 30 appearances in a really, really inferior league, like the Ukrainian league is inferior to the Eredivisie and the Portuguese league. So there was no way in the history of life where he was worth that amount. So I get the whole, you have to pay the going rate when you're a top club and all this kind of stuff, but Arsenal were willing to go to 90 million all in for this player. So the only reason why they don't have him is, they wanted 10 million more, and also Chelsea decided to double his wages. They wanted him, they're paying him 125,000 pounds a week. There's players that we have that have been around longer that aren't going to get paid that much, so I get the aspect of like, well, Arsenal aren't a big top club if they're not willing to just put down 100 million on this player. But the difference between I get the concept of you're going to have to pay more for a player like Mudryk because of where the market is, but you can't really say that he's exactly like Anthony and Darwin Nunez and all that kind of stuff because of the amount of games that they had played in the league that they were in. So, yeah, it's. Well, do you have 10 million? Because it wasn't just 10 million. So here's the problem that I feel like you got, like, people are just trying to make it seem like, Arsenal just didn't do the business. This is a player, again, like, I wouldn't run. Okay. So somebody said this in a group chat, and I just thought it was just like this is the smartest thing that anybody said was, if Arsenal don't bring somebody in, it's a failure, period. Right. But in terms of Mudryk, I would not want any of you guys running a business for me, because you're just saying, okay, we'll throw the extra 10 million out there. For what reason? It wasn't just 10 million. It was the additional guaranteed fees, the additional add-ons that were more attainable, and doubling the wages. And oh, by the way, you have a crazy owner from another team that is would go into a bidding war. So it may not have even ended up being 100 million. It could have been 110, 120, 130. So no, Arsenal is not getting into a bidding war. They offered what they were willing to offer, which was over the odds for a player that hasn't played that many games. And so yes, they did try to play the game. They were willing to go 30 to 40 million above what he's worth to bring in that player. Period. And another team came in that was willing to pay more, And if we had come up to their offer, they would have went up again. Again, I kind of understand it, but Arsenal have done really well with what they're doing. It's about what they do from here. I kind of get what people are trying to say, but I think people are just trying to say, well, you should have just spent the 10 million. I'm glad you don't run my business. If you're saying I just give them the extra 10 million, because it wasn't just 10 million. Sorry. Hello. So yeah, I don't want Pepe back. Sorry guys. Stefan says, squad depth question, Vieira's ability to play in the xhaka role and Tommy supporting the back line. Can we see Marquinhos as a striker or Martinelli? I don't see Marquinhos in this team past January. Not because he's not a talented young player, but because he's a young player that needs to go out and like do his thing. In terms of like Vieira can play the xhaka role. He can play that role. Like Martinelli can play striker, but I think Arteta is all in on Eddie. I think Arteta is almost making it up to Eddie because he didn't give him that much playing time last season, even though he really backed him and all that kind of stuff. And they gave him the big contract and all that kind of stuff. So he has to go full in with Eddie now. Like, there's not going to be much shifting of the front line from here on out. Nketiah is the backup to Jesus, and Martinelli and Saka need backups for their position. Marquinhos is a winger, so he's not going to play striker. Do you know what I mean? The only player that I think we have in our squad that can occupy a lot of different positions at a decent level is Emile Smith-Rowe. He can play 10, he can play 8 to a certain extent, he can play off of the wing, and he can probably play false 9. But in terms of Marquinhos, I don't think that he's somebody that, like, Don One says Mudryk should have put his foot down and said only Arsenal. When you're a young player and a young person and people are using different methods to try to coerce you into, going with what they want, it's really difficult. And so I get what we say it should just be easy, but I don't think it was that easy where he could just say, you know what, no, just Arsenal. Do you know what I mean? With the situation that they were in, they were not going to accept our bid. That's what they told him. So he didn't have a choice. His choice was stay there, where he didn't want to stay. He wanted to go, or go to Chelsea, because we're not going to accept Arsenal's bid no matter what it is. And I'm not going to lie to you guys, like, the whole way that it played out on social media with Chelsea and Shakhtar kind of bantering back and forth and stuff like that, I think they just wanted to sell him to Chelsea, period. Like, I think that's the club that they wanted to sell him to. They didn't want to sell him to Arsenal, and we just have to just own that and just let it go. Like, I'm in a new place, in a new time, and like, Arsenal tried, and I am disappointed because we wasted 15 days. My main issue is just if you knew that they were going to stay like on the 100 million, you weren't willing to come up to it, we shouldn't have even entered negotiations. That's where I'm at with it. Not that I feel like you should have just spent the extra 10 million. Like, that's not how business works, you guys. You can't just throw the extra 10 million. It's not just 10 million. Tony says you don't say only Arsenal when you're getting paid double. Anike says, my Nketiah stocks are booming. Always believed in him, and I'm so glad he's finally getting recognized for his hard work and talent. You have always backed him, I remember. So yeah, we just have to hope that Arsenal come up with something. Am I holding my breath? No. I'm not holding my breath, but at the same time, like, I have to hope that Arsenal will do the right thing. There is 331 of you guys right now. Make sure you like the video and subscribe to the channel. I'm going to head off. I will be on the football terrace in about 20 minutes doing the top 6 show where we will be laughing at George and Patrick, who are Spurs fans. So make sure you guys join us there, like I said, in about 20 minutes on the football terrace. And until then, I'll see you guys. Love y'all. Bye.